All right, good afternoon. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Institute of World Politics. For those of you who are new, IWP is a graduate school of national security and international affairs. We have 5 master's degree programs, 18 certificates of study, and a new doctoral program. We also offer the opportunity to take a single course without having to pay an entire semester's worth of tuition cost. One can also audit such a course at a much less cost. If you are interested in learning more about us, please feel free to speak to one of our staff at the conclusion of this event. Franak Viačorka is a digital media strategist and journalist from Belarus. He works as a research media analyst for the U.S. Agency for Global Media, focusing on digital markets of Russia and Eurasia. His research focuses on Russian and Chinese efforts to control smaller actors, spread disinformation, and build a sovereign internet infrastructure. He has served as a creative director for the Belarus Service of Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, vice president for Digital Communication Network, and consultant for Freedom House and Broadcasting Board of Governors. Please join me in welcoming our speaker today.
Good afternoon. I'm very pleased to be here. It's my 5th lecture in the Institute. Today we are going to speak about Russia and about Belarus. I think my presentation will take about 40-45 minutes, and we will have another 50 minutes to discuss, and I will be happy to answer your questions. As you probably know, Russia intensified talks about deeper integration with Belarus recently. But before speaking about recent developments in Belarus, I also would love to cover what's happening within Russia. So the plan for today's discussion will be, we will discuss first what's happening in Russian internet. Next, I will show you the development of Russian media toolbox in Belarus. We will analyze tactics and scenarios. I will make a presentation about content analysis, and we will provide some recommendations what to do in this situation. So why we talk about Belarus today? In 2018, Russia introduced a tax maneuver, which made Lukashenko and Belarus losing a lot of money, lost from the change of oil pricing. After this, Russian media, Telegram channels started attacking Lukashenko, Belarus independence, Belarus sovereignty. Russian ambassador Babic, who was like the most pro-Russian, the most anti-Lukashenko, and the most active politically, he was dismissed. The talks on deeper integration continued. And recently, since September, we had another round of developments. So the multiple US officials came to Minsk, met Lukashenko. After this, in December, Lukashenko met Putin in Sochi, where they discussed the roadmaps on deeper integration. These roadmaps include common customs, common tax code, but also common currency, common parliament. These talks spiked protests in Belarus, 5 rounds of protests in Minsk and regional cities. Lukashenko gave interview to Echo Moskvy, liberal media outlets in Russia, where he criticized harshly Putin's imperialist politics towards Belarus. Then they met again and again. January 1st, Russia stopped supplying oil to Belarus. Belarus made a symbolic gesture buying Norwegian oil. A few days ago, they made a deal with private companies in Russia and with Soccer from Azerbaijan to buy oil from there. But still, it's not enough oil to fulfill all Belarus oil demands. Now they had an agreement about gas pricing, similar to what they had in 2019, but still the negotiations on oil price continue. So this is a very, very brief introduction of the recent developments. So basically here we have several lines. One, it's a discussion about Belarus independence and integrity and a deeper integration with Russia. And on the other hand, we see oil and gas pricing. Lukashenko is interested to continue his geopolitical seesaw strategy. So as we often joke in Belarus, in winter Lukashenko is pro-Western, in summer he is pro-Russian. So basically this helps him to sustain and to survive for 25 years already. From the West, he expects financial support, first of all, but also European Union is a large market for Belarus goods. And on the East, of course, Lukashenko feels more comfortable in terms of values, common interests, and I think Lukashenko still has some hope to build political career in Russia. This is why very often Lukashenko makes gestures like inviting Russian regional journalists and saying that Belarus is the biggest Russian friend, and if Russian people want, Belarus will be happy to create a common state. But at the same time, he's very anti-Putin. At least he became very anti-Putin in his recent statements. But as former Polish ambassador in Belarus emphasized a few days ago, Lukashenko is scared of Western democracy much more than of Russian world, Ruski mir. This is why, besides all these conflicts, all this competition, all these verbal wars with Putin, he still, in the end, will prefer Russia over the liberal West. What is Lukashenko really independent, and what other tools of pressure on Lukashenko? Many of us believe that Russia is scary to Lukashenko because of its military, because perhaps Belarus will become the next Crimea. It's possibly true, but I think for Russia, military scenario, the scenario of annexation of Belarus, it's not the best one in this situation. Russia still possesses a large amount of instruments to put pressure on Belarus government. First of all, trade wars. Every 3-6 months, we observe so-called apple blockade, milk war, meat war, when Russia stops importing goods from Belarus. And this is always connected to political demands by Putin. In case if Russia will block Belarusian goods from entering Russian market, Belarus economy can suffer much more than from potential even oil prices losses if Russia will change oil price to the international competitive price. Another instrument of pressure on Belarus can be a blockade of the border. So we often say that, yeah, Belarus needs the closed border with Russia. But in case if Russia closes the border, Lukashenko loses almost 40% of transit income. For now, Russian western border is the most important channel of transiting goods from China to the Europe. And in case if Russia closes this border, Lukashenko loses so much in terms of transit, in terms of potential income. And hydrocarbons, of course, gas and oil is super important for Belarusian oil refineries. We still have Naftan and Mazir refinery, which depend fully on Russian hydrocarbons. So, if I would say what is the most important for Lukashenko, I would say the first three helps him to survive. But fourth and fifth, media and military, helps to keep him under control and to stop him from potential approachment with the West. Let's look what's happening in Russia. Russia is trying to control internet space. Several years ago, they revived the idea of RUNET, sovereign Russian internet, and they in March 2019 they organized the first drills on filtering content. They provided private companies with a special equipment for controlling content on messengers and websites. Putin introduced the project of the law on accessible internet, which allows all Russians to have access to Russian platforms without any cost. So basically, Vkontakte, Yandex, Mail.ru become free to every Russian. Government blocked encrypted messengers, Proton Mail, all the mail services that allow to correspond secretly. And they also fined Facebook and Twitter for refusal to save users' data in Russia. So this is only the beginning, and this is something that China already has done several years ago. And what can happen in Belarus that this law, these practices will be automatically moved to Belarus as well. And this is also the part of the negotiation between Putin and Belarus government. So the sovereign internet infrastructure, it is not only about closed internet traffic, but it's first of all about controlling the platforms. And today, Yandex and Mail.ru are two major private companies controlling Belarus information space. And I will be speaking today about how they use Russian services in order to push pro-Russian narrative. So let's go back to Russian presence in Belarus. 2 years ago, I made here the lecture, and I was speaking about Russian soft power in Belarus, about pro-Russian organizations, paramilitary initiatives, sports clubs. But today, I propose to focus entirely on Russian information infrastructure. On the left hand, we can see news aggregators. This is a very important instrument of providing news relevant and important to Russian Federation, not only in Belarus, but in all post-Soviet space. So-called recommendation services, Yandex Zen, Yandex News, and Mail.ru News exist in all Russian-speaking space. And according to the official theory, these aggregators are not controlled manually by editors, but the selection of media that can export news to these personalization services are decided by editors. So, for example, Radio Free Europe or Poland-funded Belsat are not on Mail.ru News, and Sputnik has almost 70% of their referral traffic from Yandex News. Social media. Odnoklassniki and Vkontakte are two major social media platforms in Belarus. And formally, they are independent, and formally they do not control the content. But what we can see the blockade of the specific topics. For example, when protests happened in Belarus in December 2019 against the integration, all the live streaming conducted by Belsat and Radio Free Europe was practically blocked. On Odnoklassniki, we see constant filtering of the content. Some posts are blocked without explanation. Some types of video are stopped from distribution, which makes this platform very similar to TikTok. It's another Chinese platform, very popular among young people now, which can filter content without prior noticing. Original websites, I will focus especially on this thing. It's a consortium of news portals and pages mimicking local regional news pages in Belarus. Telegram channels, this is a particular important instrument for distributing insights and fake news. Sputnik is important for producing content which is later distributed through VK communities. VK communities are the most toxic communities and pages on this list, and I think their goal is not to spread specific narrative, but to mobilize young people to pro-Russian initiatives and organizations, and think tanks which usually just justify pro-Russian policies or put in statements or explain complex things in Belarus politics. Narratives. So there are three major narratives in social media, Telegram channels, and Odnoklassniki. Two of them are alarmist, and one is activism. So one is alarmist, anti-Russian. The The story is that Lukashenko already dealt with the United States. He is traitor. He agreed for NATO base in Minsk. That Lukashenko is going to introduce Greek Catholicism and to forbid Orthodox Church. And this story, this anti-Russian alarmist narrative, is usually spread on Telegram. So Telegram is the main platform for this anti-Russian alarmist narrative. On the right hand, we can see alarmist but pro-Russian, which I must say happens simultaneously. All these channels, they can distribute absolutely opposite narrative at the same time. Alarmist pro-Russian is primarily focused and on pro-Russian Lukashenko's position. They take all Lukashenko's interviews, they select statements which are very anti-Western, very anti-American. They take statements from archive and present Lukashenko as very pro-Russian guy. And the goal is to show that Lukashenko already sold everything to Russia. And in the middle, these are official channels. These are mainly Sputnik. This is also official statements by Russian embassy in Minsk. They say, come on guys, no worries, Lukashenko is okay, nothing will happen to Belarus independence, we just continue what we started in 1999. I don't have explanation what is the long-term strategy of having these three absolutely opposing narratives. But I think the main idea is to confuse population and also to discredit Lukashenko, both in Russia and in Belarus. Every article published on Russian media, on Russian social networks, on Telegram channels, they have encouragement to the discussion. So this is one of the publication about Putin-Lukashenko talks about Belarusian Russian integration. And the question was asked what Lukashenko wants. 66,000 people answered. 45% thinks that Lukashenko wants to tear Belarus away from Russia. 46% wants to live as it is, it means to not change anything, and 7% believes that Lukashenko wants to reconcile with Russia. And I think these results of this poll, in general, they illustrate the picture within the Russia. Why Russia wants to discredit Lukashenko? Because Lukashenko is very popular there. Lukashenko still is very popular politician. At some surveys, even more popular than Putin. And Russia cannot make anything against him until he has the image of the saint. So what they want to weaken him, to weaken his image, which will lead them to put additional pressure, to discredit, or even to use military force if needed. Another narrative, which is popular on VK primarily, and on think tanks, that Lukashenko is a prodigal son. The guy who was looking for himself, who was trying to make friendship with the West, with the United States, with Pompeo, but he realized that there is no better solution than to be with Russia. And this is very positive towards Lukashenko, and this is primarily targeting Belarus audience on local VK pages and regional websites. In contrast to Telegram channels, where Lukashenko is super negative hero, Lukashenko on VK is a superhero, still is a superhero. And Lukashenko is still a superhero who supports Russia. Marketing agency Digital Guru made an analysis of messaging on social media in December 2019 during the protests in Minsk and the Lukashenko-Putin talks. And they analyzed the sentiment of these messages and also the platforms where the major discussions among internet users were happening. And we can see that the majority of messages were happening on same platforms that belong to Russia, VK and OK. And this analysis also discovered that Belarusian internet users perceived these talks and these deals between Putin and Lukashenko in much more aggressive and negative way compared to Russia. And this is also the result of how these news were presented in Russia and in Belarus. And another number, which is not here, which showed that Belarus, all this news about integration and Putin-Lukashenko talks in Belarus were mostly discussed by young people under 40, and in Russia mostly discussed by people 45, 50 plus. Tactics. Tactics changed. It's not the same as it was 5 or 10 years ago. First of all, the conversation, the discussion on Telegram, this is not something that we can call World Wide Web. When before Russia invested in Russia Today, in Sputnik, it was open, it was easy to check, easy to follow. Now the major discussions are happening on closed groups, Telegram channels, on forums that are closed from researchers, from journalists, from activists and politicians. And this is a big change that happened to the internet space, not only in Russia but worldwide. When 10 years ago everything was visible, now the users are concerned with their privacy and they go to closed platforms. This is why, for example, Facebook groups, closed groups or secret groups are so popular, because regular people from outside, they cannot see what's happening there. Same thing on chat. In Belarus there are dozens of chat that count from 300 to 3,000 people, including Belarus ministers, KGB officers, political party leaders, pro-Russian activists, where the major discussions happen. And we call this part of the internet deep web, which is not visible to regular users. And the analysis of this deep web thing is much more difficult than analysis of traditional websites. Another big change, it's a distribution. We call it like fan-type distribution. So basically, when before Russia was trying to invest a lot in variety of content, now they invest much less in content, but much more in the distribution. They create one story on Sputnik, which is well prepared, well designed, and then this story is repacked for different audiences and for different platforms. When we speak about regional network of websites, they just copy each other. One website in Vitebsk created the story, and all other regional websites just copy-paste the story. Trojan horse tactic. So this is what I mentioned before. It's mimicking a regional website thing. So they realized that on Telegram, it's impossible to change public opinion in Belarus by pushing messages through Neziger channel. Neziger, it's a popular Russian Telegram channel about Ukraine, Russia, foreign policy. They have a lot of insights about what's going on in Kremlin. But they realized that Belarusians do not trust anymore to Russian channels, and they began in the end of 2018 creating the local Telegram channels and local websites. And hyperlocal segmented decentralized distribution. So when before they invested into large and powerful media outlets like RT, Sputnik, Russia, like in Baltic states, Russian TV channels are very popular. Now they invest in small and many that target specific niche audiences. Let's go first to the websites. So these are 4 groups of websites segmented by toxicity. This research was made by this center, Andrei Eliseo, my colleague. So here on the left we see the most toxic websites. All of them are pseudo-local in Belarus, and on the right you can see the Belarus-Russia Union website and purely Russian websites writing about Belarus. The narratives analysis shows that most of these websites, they share chauvinist theories, conspiracies, anti-Western narratives. The very popular idea is that Belarus language does not exist. Belarus independence was an accident. Belarus shouldn't get independence after Soviet Union collapse. And Americans, Poles, Lithuanians are helping to support this fake Belarus identity. I will focus more on narratives later when we will be analyzing Wiki. But let's look at the regional websites. In my opinion, it's one of the most dangerous things that is happening in Belarus. Belarus media space is very weak. Belarus media do not have access to the state distribution system, and the regional websites, newspapers, magazines, they do not have enough opportunities to survive without foreign funding. Many of them closed since 2010, and the released niche was taken by these mimicking pro-Russian pages. Vidbich, Mogilев Bay, Nash Gomel. As you can see, they don't use like Putin's face as the logo, they don't use like Russian username in their headlines or titles. Most of them are using some elements from the local tradition. For example, we can see here Beresti News is using the part of the city emblem. Mogilев websites, they use the city hall picture. So they're trying to pretend they're so local, they're so close to people, but the messages they distribute, they absolutely anti-Belarusian and anti-local in most cases. The analysis, the investigation made by Andrei Eliseev showed that all of these websites, I think not all of them, but like 5 of 7, are registered to the same person. It was not difficult to check because there is international system WHOIS where you can just like type the domain name. And this Alexei Semyonov is an employee of CIS-EMO organization which organized the observation of elections in post-Soviet space. Let's look at their statistics. The good thing that besides Source Info, the Gomel website, Gomel region website, others do not have like big audience, and they didn't manage to build this audience. But the major problems comes not from these numbers, but from the multiplication of messages. Sometimes I feel that these websites, when they write like 50, 70 news per day, they don't intend to change public opinion, but they intend to put specific topic in the top of the search engines. I think many of these websites have only one purpose: to put specific news in the very top of the search result page. And the VK, Twitter, trolls accounts, they serve to the same purpose. We can also see here the sources of traffic. As you can see, when we take the referral traffic, the most of them are alive only thanks to Yandex. Yandex Zen, Yandex News, Mail.ru News are like the fuel for these audiences. Without the support of Yandex, these websites perhaps will not have any users and any visitors. We also can see here that these websites have some similar pattern in terms of sharing information. So all of them are sharing content from each other, but also they share content from anti-Ukrainian pages and purely Russian media websites like Vesti24 or RuBaltic, which is like Russian news for about Baltic countries, or Russia.org, it's another chauvinist page, and you see Sozhinfo, which is the most popular one, regional website. It actually shares this Russia.org. Sputnik. Sputnik is the phenomenon because I don't know any person in Belarus who reads Sputnik, and same time Sputnik is the most becomes the most popular news website in Belarus after to Dubai. And this is a surprise to me. This is a surprise for many analysts. But the answer is simple. Most of their traffic is coming from Yandex, is coming from Mail.ru news, and this is not people who actually come to Sputnik on purpose. Most of the users, of these 10 million unique visitors claimed by Margarita Simonyan, they're absolutely accident visitors to Sputnik website. But it's a question of time when these accident users will become loyal users. After seeing content by Sputnik 1, 2, 3, 4 times, will they will to stay? Will they want to add this website to their bookmarks? We don't know for sure. And when we analyze all the numbers, yeah, it's true that Sputnik is growing extremely fast. It's true that its audience is bigger than RFE-RL, Belsat, Radio Racja, Euradio together. It's true, their numbers is huge, but same time, it's true that the referral traffic generated by Yandex, as you can see here, in December 2019, during the Putin-Lukashenko talk, it's created by Yandex. 70% of these 3 million are coming from Yandex. So what we see here that Russians managed to build infrastructure which supports each other, and when we take each part of this infrastructure, it doesn't seem very dangerous. It doesn't have like millions or billions of users. But together, it works perfectly. It works in an organized way. And unfortunately, we don't know who is coordinated this system and makes it work so perfectly. VK and Odnoklassniki, two major social networks in Belarus. They're popular not only in Belarus, they're popular in Kazakhstan, in Armenia, VK popular in some Balkan countries as well. We don't know for sure how many users. Of course, they claim this hundreds of millions, but we always must remember these are Russian platforms, and that can be similar situation to Simonyan's tweet, that they can pretend they have millions, but it doesn't mean it's true. And unfortunately, we cannot check it. What we know for sure that these platforms still remain the most popular in Belarus. Vkontakte and Odnoklassniki are used by half of Belarus population. It's not internet users, but population. So it means like 3-4 million of people are using or at least have account on these platforms. I call these platforms hostile platforms because I'm journalist and I see how they perceive content produced by Belsat TV, by Radio Free Europe. They just delete everything they don't like. They block pages, they block accounts without noticing. Another analysis made by Brand Analytics here shows us how many messages created in thousands. So we see that in 1 month, 20 million messages or posts created on Vkontakte, which makes it the most popular and the most used platform in Belarus. Same messengers. So messengers can be used for two purposes. On one hand, they're used for private messaging. We write to our kids, to our parents, our friends, but this is not about Telegram. Because Telegram, besides traditional messaging, P2P messaging, it can be used as the publishing platform. And all these Telegram channels we are discussing today, they are using Telegram as the platform where they can distribute disinformation or fake news. Let's look at the VK communities. That's my favorite part. Here we are going to see the most recent posts on these pages, and I think you will like it because sometimes they are funny, sometimes they are weird, but it works. Unfortunately, it works, and their numbers are growing. It's not like extreme growth. They don't have millions. No, this is like the most toxic communities on VK. So I counted the total number of followers is like about 100,000. But when we count all the people who are exposed to this content, including those who are accidentally shown this post by VK, is much, much bigger. It's up to 400,000 or 500,000 people, primarily young users of Belarus. And you see the names, I try to translate them. Most of them are using this chauvinist or imperialist cliché or this trillion Slavic nation idea in their names. They emphasize the Belarus, Rus part of the word as well. So everything must work on this subconscious level. Today, my colleagues from iSense, it's a think tank working on monitoring Russian disinformation in Belarus. Today, they launched an interactive map. You can try it by yourself, iSense.org toxic, and you can play with these 35 communities they identified, and you can see the statistics, the number. There is a listening tool here, which shows the actual number of users engaged. So yeah, if we take each of these communities, it's pretty small. If we take together, it's huge, and it makes concern. It makes us concerned. Using the VK communities and Telegram channels did not begin last year, and not this January. It started several years ago, but the most spectacular case happened in December 2018. It just happened after text maneuver. Just before all this conversation about Belarus independence started in 2018. All these groups, dozens, hundreds of pages, they posted the same question to their followers. Do you support union with Russia? Do you support entering Belarus to Russia? Do you want Belarus to join Russia as 6 regions? Do you want just to Russia? So all these groups, sometimes they were not political at all. Some of them were just like writing some things about cinema, movies, cartoons. They suddenly posted political question. And this is, I think, the main idea, the long-term goal of this infrastructure. Now we see only the superficial impact, but in situation of full mobilization, this effect can be multiplied in dozens times. Let's look at some examples to know what they do. This is how these audiences and these pro-Russian pages see the world in 2030. So yes, Europe is the LGBT caliphate, China is China, Syria is the whole Africa, Venezuela is South America, and all North America is the great desert of the tolerance. This is a general grand vision of the world by Putin eyes. But when we take a closer look, we can check what they really don't like in the West. And this is everything from February, from this month. So first of all, they reacted very aggressively to to Lukashenko and Pompeo's meeting. It was discussed everywhere. Thousands of memes, hundreds of posts. Most of them do not write texts. They are very good on memes, but regarding analytics, they just shared Sputnik's articles. On the right, the text is that the United States decided on deeper integration with Belarus. They just like playing the words deep integration with Russia. But when Pompeo came to Minsk, they replayed the idea that US wants deeper integration instead of Russia. Here it's the potential consequences of being friends with United States, and there are the list of all countries apparently bombed by the United States, occupied by the United States. The last one is Ukraine in 2013 and 2014. And on the left, it was the same day posted, it's the meeting of Pompeo with the leaders with human rights defenders and the leaders of civil society in Minsk. Anti-LGBT. So this is the thing which works always. This is the thing which is unfortunately very often shared and supported by people who actually don't like Putin and don't support Russia. Belarus society is very conservative, and what they try to do, they just try to play on this anti-LGBT sentiments. And Buttigieg idea, Buttigieg was like the main hero of all these public communities, groups and channels for a week or two. Now, of course, they got a new hero, they got Sanders, they got Trump, they tried to play with their statements, but Buttigieg was a cool finding for them to use it to discredit, as they believe, to discredit the United States. Anti-Lithuania. Anti-Lithuania, it's a new thing, because Lithuania announced the war to Belarus, to Lukashenko's nuclear plant built by Russia. And of course, Minister Lenkevičius, Minister of Foreign Affairs, became the ambassador of the evil. So basically, for the week, all these channels were attacking Vilnius, the forum in Vilnius, and Lenkevičius' statements on Lukashenko and on the nuclear plant, when Lenkevičius said that we will ask our allies to not buy energy from this nuclear plant. And on the left, it's the post saying that, do you know that the statue of Grand Duchy of Lithuania was written in Russian? Why? Because when we came there, Lithuania didn't have any literacy. And this is why it was written in Russian. So it's a basic manipulation. Anti-opposition, of course. Now Belarusian political party leaders, they organize primaries. And all these Russian pages, they attack the primaries and the candidates with reasons and without. Pro-Lukashenko, as I mentioned, in contrast to Telegram, VK likes Lukashenko. And VK still believes that Lukashenko is the major provider and supporter of this triune Slavic nation and Russian-Belarus integration. Pro-imperialist, here we can see that don't celebrate Valentine's Day because we have the day of Peter and Fevronia. The quotes by Suvorov that you should beat your enemy. On the day of the native mother tongue, native language, the statistics that majority of Belarusians select Russian language in the ATM machines. So very basic stuff, but when you multiply it, it can create the effect. And of course, anti-Poland. Anti-Poland, it's like anti-Polish narrative is like the super major topic. Every week they create the cartoon, the meme, the picture against Card of Poland, against Pilsudski, against Bury. On the left you can see the line, the people waiting for the Card of Poland, and on the left, the table without people, it's Żyj Belarus, it's like Belarusian opposition table. On the left bottom you can see that Kosovo is Serbia and Galicia is Polska. And I don't know why they often put Ukraine and Belarus together. So all these articles, how someone in Poland beaten Ukrainian immigrants, they distribute this idea showing like, look, your Poles hate you, so your Poland will betray you, so don't expect anything from it. Anti-Ukrainian, so I know it's weird, but this was Ukrainian flag on the left, and this shows that unfortunately Ukraine made their own choice, so they are not brothers anymore, but we're still together, Belarus and Russia, and a very nice patriotic poem. Telegram. Let's. What time's now? Okay, quickly. So Telegram. Telegram has a very complex story of development. On one hand, Russian government is trying to block it. On the other hand, Telegram is used by majority of Russian users, politicians, even the Russian official media are using Telegram for content distribution. So we don't really know what is behind it. Do they really fight Telegram, or they just want to show that Telegram is quasi-independent, quasi-anti-Putin, and they use Telegram for their own purposes? So what happened in Belarus? What happened in Ukraine? Telegram came there as the dissident channel, but for now, Telegram became the most toxic channel, the most toxic platform, and the platform where the most of disinformation and fakes are created. Telegram itself is not a big threat, because the users who subscribe to these pro-Russian channels, it's not like millions of people. But the most dangerous if the Telegram insights and fakes are shared by traditional media. And this is a way how Telegram and anonymous channels on Telegram legitimize themselves. I analyzed 6 channels. Most of them were covering Putin-Lukashenko talks, covering protests in Belarus. They are very anti-Lukashenko. They are very pro-Russian. All these channels are registered to Belarus phone numbers, but all of them were registered in the period from November 2018 to March 2019. This is what I mentioned in the beginning, when Russians decided that it's impossible to reach Belarus population with Russian channels. You need to create quasi-local channels. So these local channels, they are writing only about politics, only pro-Russian content. Most of them distribute conspiracy theories. For example, that protests in Minsk in December were managed by son of Lukashenko. That Lukashenko organized these opposition rallies to make Putin angry, and so on and so on. I will skip this slide. So this is example, for example, how they covered Pompeo's visit to Minsk. As I mentioned, Pompeo, it was the biggest, the highest ranked official since Clinton's visit in 1994 to Belarus. And for Russian media, it was a huge loss. It was a huge event, and they reacted very aggressively to this. So I just made a short summary. What ideas, what insights, what conspiracies Telegram channels distribute. First of all, that Pompeo brought personal letter, secret letter to Lukashenko from Trump. All of them spread this idea, but the content of this letter was different. So different channels, they sent, one channel said that Trump proposed Lukashenko to create one big state, including Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Poland, Ukraine, and Belarus, and to call it Grand Duchy of Lithuania. Another letter was that Lukashenko was promised by Trump membership in WTO, EU, NATO, and $25 billion next year if Lukashenko will stop deeper integration with Russia. But later, all these fake debunking websites, they began speaking that it's not so easy to join NATO, and it's impossible to become a WTO member like in 2021 for Belarus. But it was too late, because when you launch the fake, all this debunking process, it takes time when this information is already widely spread and discussed. The next idea that US and Russia agreed that Lukashenko must leave and integration will continue, but without him. So this was an idea that Putin actually is okay with Pompeo's visit to Minsk. They just wanted to pass to Lukashenko that his days are going to the end. The next, it's an alarmist message that if we will not annex Belarus, it will be done by NATO soldiers. So we should do it as soon as possible. Russia must offer Lukashenko more than just cheap oil and gas, and Russia doesn't need Belarus today, too expensive. Integration should end in 2022. And this is an idea which is very widely discussed now, that integration will continue, but since Putin found a way to stay in power without Belarus, let's not push, let's not be in a rush. Let's make this integration process smooth. And messaging. So there is no unified message of Telegram channels, VK groups, Sputnik. Many of these ideas are controversial, and there is no centralized center which distribute, the specific idea. So there is two opposing ideas where Lukashenko is an enemy and Lukashenko is a victim. And sometimes same channel in one post can make Lukashenko an enemy, and the next post can present him as the victim. The demonization of the West. So basically, US, Poland, and recently Lithuania are like the demons. Integration is unavoidable. It's commonly shared across all the channels and platforms, and often, always, comparison to Ukraine in the negative sense. Who are vulnerable? Young people, population with low media literacy, older generation, because Odnoklassniki is mostly used by people 55 plus, They spend a lot of time there, especially people on retirement who don't work. They come to Odnoklassniki, they can spend 4 or 5 hours a day discussing politics, Pompeo, Trump, Lukashenko, and Putin. And last slides, what to do. So it's very important to empower, to enhance media space in Belarus. So what we see now, it's a window of opportunity. We observed same situation in 2009, when before presidential election 2010, Lukashenko allowed independent media to work legally, without detentions, without fines. Political party leaders were able to register presidential candidates. So this year, in the fall, there will be presidential elections again. And it seems that Lukashenko will let this year be free, open, and democratic. But it also doesn't mean that this democracy will not finish after elections. It's very important to invest into new media, regional groups, local groups, into non-conventional media outlets on VK, Odnoklassniki, that are not controlled by Russians. It's very important to monitor ISN's example, when they monitor, for example, VK toxic communities, but it's very important to do the same research on other platforms as well, and use it as the alert system to know where what narrative is pushed and where the main threat or risk can come. Cross-sector collaboration to work with educators, especially with school teachers. Why it's important? Because that's the only one way to reach kids and to enhance media literacy among young people. Create content, infotainment, edutainment. For example, TikTok. We still at USAGM we don't know how to reach audiences on TikTok, and TikTok is like 5th popular platform in Belarus, especially among young people. We don't create content for TikTok. We don't create entertainment. We should find a way to tell political story, to explain complex topics in the form, in the manner which is usable and digestible by young people, and to support identity things. So all these projects, programs supporting Belarusian language, lessons, classes, virtual lectures, history programs created by Bielsa TV channel, which is sponsored by Polish government, very important. Education programs for Belarus. Basically, we don't have any conventional institutions in Minsk that can educate people non-censored, pro-Belarusian version of history. I'm done. Do you have any questions? I know we have limited time, but...
Yes, I'm Nicola Lakunina, the representative of the Russian embassy. Thank you for your very interesting lecture. I was actually attracted by mentioning of Russia-Belarus conflict, the announcement of your lecture. But I'm not sure I have heard anything about the Russia-Belarusian conflict. We're actually allies, we're members of the unified state, we're building unified state, we're members of CSTO and Eurasian Union, we're allies. What the conflict are you talking about? So, and it was actually very funny to learn that some Russian ambassadors can be more pro-Russian or less pro-Russian. This part was especially funny.
Thank you for your comment. I think the idea you represent is exactly on the center. This is official Russian position that we just want status quo, that nothing serious is happening, that we continue our integration plans that we began in 1999, that Lukashenko is our partner, we are members of Eurasian Union, we are members of ADKB, but same time, simultaneously with these narratives, we see the developments of this radical these extreme narratives, which are getting more and more visible and more heard, not only on the toxic Telegram channels, but in conventional media as well. These alarmist sites. But I got your point, and I think the official position is on the center, which proved the point. Yes, Carl?
I'm Carl House of the Joint Policy American National Committee. On the 5th anniversary of the death of Boris Nemtsov today, I'm just wondering if you've had a chance to take a look and see how the media is dealing with that topic today.
Unfortunately, I did not follow, today's discussion in media in Belarus or Russia. But in general, when this happened, when Nemtsov was killed, it was a huge. It was a big thing for all of us. I remember this day because I was on the on my news shift exactly when he was killed. I put the news on the Radio Free Europe webpage in Belarus. And Nemtsov was an important figure because Nemtsov was representative of the liberal Russian opposition, which believed that Russia can coexist with neighboring countries. And unfortunately, after his death, we see lesser and lesser people who believe that Russia can be liberal and live in equal partner relationship with Ukraine, Belarus, Caucasus states. Now, even in Russian liberal media like TV Rain or Kommersant, we often hear this Russian chauvinist idea, even sometimes anti-Belarusian publications or statements that Belarusian language, for example, is artificial or dying. Next question. Yeah. Okay.
If you want, you can go ahead first.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Ekaterina. I'm a student at GW and journalist from Primy Channel, Ukraine. My question is more about what do you think, what role does the youth play? I know that there's a lot of talk about how, when the boomers will die and will be 6 feet underground, the youth of Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine and Georgia, we will all magically spring up, have our wings out, and everyone are going to become liberal. And yet on one of your slides, it was mentioned that young people are susceptible to propaganda. So what do you think? Do you think that young people are actually becoming more and more resistant to propaganda? Or do you think that they're still very much susceptible to it? And I'm asking more about Belarus, because in Belarus, I've been to Belarus plenty of times. I have friends who live there, and what they're telling me is that a lot of Belarusian kids don't have an interest in learning Belarusian because they don't see the practicality of it. Their media primarily is Russian, and many of them don't even care about learning English, which unfortunately is becoming a reality for for a lot of kids in Ukraine as well. So, is this theory of liberal pro-Western kids true, or is it just an ideal spread by a lot of people?
Thanks for your question. After 2014, Maidan and Ukrainian Revolution and the war with the Russian annexation of Crimea, the interest to Belarus identity, culture, and language became much bigger. Many social initiatives launched in Minsk and Belarus regions on learning Belarus language. Mova Cikava, Mova na Nova. Every week they gathered hundreds of people in different towns, villages, and cities, where people discussed history, language, even politics. This process continued since then, and now more and more interest to this identity thing. Since then, thanks to the civil society effort, monument to Kostushko, the common Belarus, Polish, Lithuanian, American hero, was erected, and it was not made by Lukashenko, but Lukashenko did not resist it. For now, for example, when Kalinovsky remains were found in Vilnius, thousands of people, especially young people, came to Vilnius to honor the ceremony. And I think there were more Belarusians than Lithuanians back then in Vilnius. Last Saturday there was a big celebration of the Mother Tongue Day, of the native language day in Minsk. More than 10,000 people attended. 5 years ago it was impossible to imagine that 10,000 people will gather in Minsk to celebrate Belarus language. Belarus language was treated as opposition language. Sometimes even police officers can detain you for using Belarusian because it was so discriminated, it was so isolated. But since then, situation changed significantly. And last Saturday event sponsored by largest Belarus brewery, by Belarus State Bank, by gambling like sports bet company. It was the proof, you know. Not very much. It was Leon, another company. But this is an example that the situation is changing, and Lukashenko understands that he can't stop it. He tried to embrace it. He tried to wear vyshyvanka, you know, national embroidered shirt, but people don't connect him. People don't perceive him as the promoter of Belarus. For young people, Lukashenko is a representative of the past, of the Soviet nostalgia. Even officials in Belarus, in Minsk City Council, for example, who are my age, they don't belong to the generation of Lukashenko. You know, they still serve to the government, they still serve to these authorities, but in the moment X, I would say, in the moment of real change, in the moment when they will have to make choice, they will not be standing on his side. Lukashenko understands this, and this is why he began playing this nationalist card more and more often. Yes.
My name is Kestutis, I'm from Lithuania. Thank you, Franak, for very interesting and very impressive analysis, and very useful analysis. Maybe you could speak also about the role of Orthodox Church in that. Do you see any help in helping to promote and spread further these narratives, but sometimes not necessarily political ones?
So Orthodox Church in Belarus is fully controlled by Russian Orthodox Church. It's not the same as in Ukraine. So we don't have legal autocephalous church. Our Belarusian Orthodox Church is the basically how to say, not grantee, but the division, the chapter of the Moscow headquarters. What they do, they allow pro-Russian sports clubs, paramilitary organizations, Cossacks initiatives to have legal status in Belarus. So there are many Cossacks clubs, groups, Cossacks, you know, these pro-Russian paramilitary activists and all that are fighters for Orthodox religion. They are not able to get official registration from Belarus authorities. Belarus authorities don't like them much, but they just register as this kruzhki, I don't know,
Circles.
like circles around the Orthodox Church, especially in the western part of Belarus. And the Orthodoxy as idea is widely spread on VK groups, on Telegram channels as well. They often oppose Orthodoxy to the Western liberal world. They say that we don't belong to the West because we are Orthodox. And besides Orthodoxy, they also use this triune Slavic nation idea, like Belarus, Ukraine. There is no like separate Belarusian people, but we belong, you know, to one group. And this idea is also shared by Orthodox priests and often cultivated, often repeated, often promoted during masses, even during masses. Lukashenko cannot do anything because Lukashenko cannot do anything about Orthodox Church, about this pro-Russian media, VK groups, because he is afraid of having scandal. He is afraid of damaging a relationship with Russia. This is why this network of Russian pages is existing. Lukashenko often says we know about pro-Russian fifth column, We know about pro-Russian Telegram channel. They do bad job. They discredit our relationship. But at the same time, he doesn't do anything. He doesn't, and he cannot do anything. In contrast to Ukraine, where, for example, pro-Russian pages, Russian media, and Russian platforms are blocked. And it seems that the ban of contacts at Odnoklassniki will be prolonged. I think in 2 months, they have to decide, and I think Wiki and Odnoklassniki will remain blocked in Ukraine. I think we have to finish. Thank you so much for your attention. Thanks so much for coming.